President Allende was the first Marxist candidate to be freely elected as a president by the Chilean Republic. That means that he was the first, so to speak, Democrat-Communist president. However, the events that led up to this election and its end can all be traced back to the Cold War taking place from 1947 to 1991. This was an ideological war between the two superpowers of the bipolar system at the time, the Soviet Union and the United States. The United States believed in a free democratic government, while the former Soviet Union believed in justice brought by a communist ideology. This video seeks to answer the question of how the Chilean coup was a reflection of the ideological conflict in the Cold War. Everything began with Allende's communist ideology not being accepted by the United States due to the conflict with Cuba that nearly led to nuclear war in 1962. It was the fear and deterrence provoked by this conflict that led the United States to react so aggressively to this election in 1970. This was because it was so close geographically, just like Cuba had been. In a way, the financing of President Nixon to the Fuerzas Armadas and pushing Pinochet to dictate was a knee-jerk reaction for the United States to prevent the conflict. The reasons for electing Augusto Pinochet to lead the Golpe de Estado of September of 1973 was that he was an extremist capitalist, as well as had agreed to completely deprive Chile from the communist ideology. He was born on November 25, 1915, and joined the Chilean army in 1935. Slowly he rose in the ranks of this army until he was appointed by Allende himself as commander-in-chief, the very man he would later lead a military coup against. After the coup, he remains in power for 25 years and is put under arrest then. Internal causes of this coup are the changes that occurred in 1925 and 1932. These were based on the middle class, excluding most extremes of the Chilean population. The major change was Chile going from aristocratic to mesocratic, meaning that the middle class became predominant in the government. However, the Democratic Christians and Unidad Popular, more communist parties, claimed that the upper conservative class still dominated society, even after the changes of 1925, and that they planned to change this to help the lower classes. This caused them to get more followers and could arguably be the reason for which Allende got elected. Looking at other short-term causes, the Unidad Popular never had much predominance in the state to begin with. It was only in the elections of ~71 that they had a bit over 50%, but this support started almost immediately after Allende assumed presidency. So the lack of actual supporters of the election weakened the democracy. This problem increasing as the citizens began disliking the sharing of the Chilean copper and other industries. The terror stories of people's homes being ransacked in the name of equality or farmland taken away are endless in relation to Allende's government. So, as a summary, the lack of actual initial support, combined with a decreasing support for the invasion of personal property and economic decay, also led to the coup from an internal perspective. The Chilean armed forces took power in the morning of September 11th by bombing the presidential palace. It is on this day that the General Augusto Pinochet became the dictator of Chile for the next 15 years. In 1988, Pinochet calls for a plebiscite in which Chileans will have to vote yes or no concerning whether he would stay in power for another 8 years or not. For various reasons, the supporters of the no campaign did not have much hope in winning. However, they won with 54.71% of the votes. Augusto Pinochet made some economic improvements, but these were at a great human cost, such as passing labor laws to the great detriment of workers' rights. As he said, he wanted to liberate Chile from Marxist oppression by suborning the Chilean Democrat Party and the truck driver strike. The United States helped him obtain what he wanted. He killed many thousands who didn't follow his ideology. The total number of people who were direct victims of violations of human rights are estimated to be around 35,000. 28,000 were tortured, and 2,279 were executed, in addition to 1,248 who went missing. Although there were people who supported Pinochet's beliefs, his brutal acts led to some of these people to stop supporting his actions. In conclusion, during November 4 of 1970, Allende's presidential period had begun, and it was a period of a socialist government that led to unjust conditions for many. Due to this, it was the beginning of the U.S. government intervention in Chilean internal affairs. American foreign policy during the Cold War is directly related to Pinochet's coup, because what we find at the heart of the Golpe Militar against Allende is an ideological conflict. During Allende's rule, his administration as to political, economic, and social policies went directly against American interests in the region. Allende's anti-capitalism demonstrated he rejected private ownership of property. This factor triggered U.S. intervention and caused a war due to Allende's political ideologies. In comparison to the Cold War, the overthrow and assault of the political palace La Moneda by Pinochet's regime was funded by outside U.S. military forces, was a consequence of Allende's political ideologies contradicting what the United States believed in. Chile is just one example of these coups that took place all over Latin America, such as Argentina, Nicaragua, etc., due to the deterrence caused by the conflict in Cuba in 1962, not allowing the two superpowers of the Soviet Union and the United States to actually confront each other. The outcome in Chile, specifically being Pinochet's dictatorship, caused contentment for many and discontentment for many others. Pinochet violated human rights by murdering and torturing people that went against his ideologies. However, Pinochet's leadership also established great economic growth, reflected on the stabilization of inflation, and great political polarization in Chilean society. Now the debatable question is, where would Chile be if President Nixon had not funded the coup of September 11, 1973? Would Allende's government have been more beneficial to Chile than Pinochet's dictatorship was? Was Pinochet's government more good or bad? And most importantly, is there truly just one answer to all of these questions?
De mis pies cansados